Welcome to Essentials for Adoption Attuned Parenting, a podcast exploring how parents can best relate and connect to their adopted child. If you have adopted, or even if you are thinking about adopting, this is the show for you. Discover tips and tools for adoption attuned parenting. This is the podcast for building a strong foundation for your adoptive family. And now, from growing intentional families together, here are your hosts, coaches, and adoptive parents, Susan, David, and Gayle Swift.
Hi, this is Susan from San Diego. Welcome to the Essentials for Adoption Attuned Parenting. I'm so glad you could join us, especially in this busy holiday season. As always, I'm here with my co-host, adoption coach, author, adoptee activist, and my colleague at Growing Intentional Families Together, Gayle Swift. Good morning, Gayle.
Good morning, Susan. It's not sunny here for a change. It's very foggy and damp.
Here in San Diego, we have some rain, and that's exciting.
So, Susan, last month we discussed the 6 top reasons you want an Adoption Attuned Family Library. Of course, we know that books can serve as an educational resource for both adoptive parents and children, as well as being a tool that provides insight, strategies, and even encouragement and empathy.
For an adoptee or any child, what a gift it would be for them to read a book and think, hey, I'm not alone out there.
Absolutely. That sense of community is so therapeutic. So that's so important for our kids to see themselves out in the world and closer to home. Books offer opportunities for connection with our adopted children. Who would not want that? Another point that we made in last month's podcast was that a family's adoption library affirms to our kids that learning and talking about adoption is a safe and welcome topic. It can also send a message to our kids that even the hard topics of adoption can be tackled by this family. We're up to the challenge.
So an Adoption Attuned Family Library is an invaluable tool for helping families address the many complex adoption issues. So we want a good one, and that would include lots of different topics, diverse adoption topics, and for a variety of age groups.
So, Susan, now that we've reviewed the why of having an Adoption Attuned Family Library, let's explore how you might go about building that library. Specific books that fit the bill of being an adoption attuned rather than just a book that is not adoption attuned, because there are many out there. We don't want to diss people, but some of those books are counterproductive for our kids. Susan, books, as you know, are a passion of mine, and I could spend hours discussing so many good ones. But for today, let's focus our discussion on 3 types of readers: younger children, slightly older children, and finally, since the holidays are approaching and a good book is a great gift for a cousin, aunt, etc., we'll mention some books that might be perfect for the extended families. And sometimes they step on our feelings or our children's feelings because they don't know better. A book can help inform them. Yeah, you can even send them a children's book and say, can you read this with Johnny the next time you visit, or the next time we're at your house? When really you're trying to educate Grandma and Grandpa more than Johnny, because you got that book home already.
Great idea.
So, Susan, a well-stocked Adoption Attuned Family Library includes books that affirm our children's reality. They want to see themselves and their experience and their family in the books that they read. Books will plant the seeds of understanding that we as parents can expand on as our kids get older.
Do you have a suggestion, Gayle?
I do. And at the risk of tooting my own horn, or our own horn, I suggest ABC Adoption and Me, which was written by myself and my daughter, Casey. Using the child familiar framework of an adoption book, it introduces a range of adoption-connected concepts, from the very simple, like, for instance, B is for belly button. Everyone has one. That's a quote. So believe it or not, this simple statement can gradually evolve to mentioning that all babies grow inside a mother's body and that the belly button is where they were originally joined. Eventually, the conversation can lead to mentioning that the child grew in their birth mother's body. So you can see how there's a natural segue as they age. You can see how there's a logical progression to increased detail and more complex understanding of what being adopted entails. So we parents want to be sure that the content of the books we choose is truthful and accurate, so that this avoids having it contradict anything we told our kid as they age. Nothing undermines trust as quickly as having to correct misinformation that was intentionally given.
Okay, so you're looking for correct information and age appropriate. Let's keep going, because here you're going to talk about a book that was a favorite of my kids.
It's called Let's Talk About It, Adoption by Fred Rogers, the famed Mr. Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. This book does an excellent job of describing adoption, giving equal weight to the need of the child and the need of adults to be parents. The pictures are diverse. The world is diverse. Good to see that reflected in book. It's an easy, short read and a great book for children of preschool and grade school ages. Our kids had us read it together over and over and over. It really connected with them. And not only that, Susan, but being part of an adoptive family means from certain perspectives, you are different. Racial diversity is another kind of difference. So it's all on the spectrum,
Yeah, your family looks a certain way, and then my family has that diversity that we're talking about. And so maybe that's why it was such a favorite of my kids, because it did include that.
The point that just came to my mind, Susan, too, is that if as a white family, we only read lily white books, our kids get a subtle message that is how the world should be. It's like, oh, this is the norm, and anything else is less than. And that's not what we want to convey. That's the kind of world we want to live in, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Families, as you said, they don't look all a certain way. And what a great thing we can start having our kids understand this, right, at a younger age. So far we've got a firm reality. You want to look for books that have correct and age appropriate information, and then books that show diversity.
Absolutely.
Keep going.
The next book for this age is by Mary Gross Nichol. She wrote a book called A Place in My Heart, but it's a great book that validates the adopted child's point of view. The main character, Charlie, is a chipmunk that is adopted into a family of squirrels who wrestles, Charlie does, with the differences in their appearance. Now, since most adoptees commonly feel like they don't quite fit in, even at younger ages, they feel this. These readers will easily identify with Charlie's struggle. He's an endearing character, full of mischief and curiosity. His mother recognizes the stress factors that challenge Charlie, and she responds in a supportive and adoption-attuned manner. She doesn't dismiss it or minimize it.
A sweet, sweet book.
Yeah, it's a great model for parents. Yeah, and it shows that you can work things through together. So when Charlie's mother acknowledges his thoughts and feelings about his birth parents, it helps him to work through them. And Charlie learns that he doesn't need to hide or deny his feelings. He doesn't have to choose one over the other. He doesn't have to worry about being disloyal or hurtful to his adoptive parents, because they affirm that both his adoptive parents and his birth parents are important to him. And as a consequence, they're important to their adoptive parents too.
So acknowledgement and affirmation.
Yeah. So instead of expecting Charlie to choose between one and the other, it's affirming everybody. Nobody wins, nobody loses.
Notice in this example how the birth mother is acknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
And you're introducing that idea. So here you place the seed, of that discussion.
The other thing your remark makes me think of, Susan, always a good idea to pre-read a book before you read it with your child. Yeah. And then even if there's something a little bit troubling in the book, you can talk about that with your child and why that's not quite accurate, or why you disagree with that point.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book by Sherry Eldridge, which, as you know, Susan, she's a well-respected voice in the adoption community. She's written many books for adults. Mm-hmm. But she also wrote a children's book called Forever Fingerprints. And it has a very simple storyline Forever Fingerprints models adoption-attuned relationships, and it will resonate with both children and parents. A good picture book is ageless, speaks to kids of every age and to the adults. It's just, they're amazingly powerful, in my opinion.
Sherry Eldridge, very well known. So when you're looking and you see a well-known author in the adoption community, that would be a good place to start if you were looking, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So in this storyline, Susan's the main character. She's a little girl, and her beloved and very pregnant aunt arrives for a visit. Not surprisingly, this stirs up many questions and emotions for Lucy. Unsurprisingly, many of them are centered around Lucy's thoughts about her birth mother. This is important because they're not once and done conversations, as you and I well know. We're still having conversations with our adult children, right, about this?
Yes.
So these conversations will occur throughout the child's journey from tot to adulthood.
It's important to normalize, as you said, these difficult conversations. And the more that a child can bring up these difficult topics or what they're thinking about inside their head that they may feel, the more that we can encourage that, then the more conversation that can occur.
Yeah, it gets easier for both mother, father, for both the parents and the kids to talk about and subsequent conversations build on earlier conversations, which is great. But you have to have the conversation. And when you first are having these difficult conversations, it may be hard, but the more you do it, the easier it gets.
And you'll need to be more proficient, I make up, as your child grows.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? You want to start early so that by the time they're teenagers, they're still willing to engage with you in these topics. Because if you never talk about it when they're little, when they're teenagers, they're unlikely to be receptive. It's like, oh, Mom, I don't need to talk about that. When in fact, they probably really do. But if you haven't laid the groundwork, it's going to be a lot harder.
We often make the point about adoption as a lifetime journey. And you've written in this blog that you point out that during adolescence, an adoptee's growing mind and body begin to truly comprehend the ramifications of being adopted, right? And they move from a rather naive acceptance of adoption to a growing realization of how adoption impacted their life and identity and what they may have lost. So again, you want to do this earlier rather than later because you don't want that push away that teenagers, they do it naturally. You'll have already set it up, that you still may have to push away, but at least you have set the stage to have those conversations.
Yeah, exactly. So Susan, as they outgrow the picture books that are suitable for the youngest kids, another book that I suggest for the slightly older child is We're Adopted, So What? This graphic style book features 5 teen girls who share a huge thing in common. Each of them was adopted. This shared experience draws them together. Yet the distinctions between their personal and individual experiences are as unique as their personalities. Feisty, fun, and outspoken, the girls do tackle some very tough topics. They share their thoughts and feelings about adoption, how it shapes their world and relationships, how it creates challenges, how it burdens them with both curiosity, or not only curiosity, frustration, anger, grief, a whole soup of emotions. And it shows how they strive to blend together their biological and adoptive worlds. It's very complicated. So it's important that they talk about it.
Gail, gives me shivers when you talk about blending together the bio and adoptive worlds. So we now recognize that connection to and respect for an adopted child's biological roots is really integral to an adoptee's ability to successfully unify their dual heritage. And let me just repeat the title, We're Adopted, So What?
Yeah. So the book is short. It's a graphic book, basically, and it provides a way to spark these important conversations with family or friends. It validates and renders compassionate witness to the adoptee's experience. And by the way, Susan, in the interest of being above board, We're Adopted, So What was also written by myself and my daughter.
There aren't that many books, by the way, for teens.
And it's a little harder to find.
Yeah, harder to find.
Yeah.
Another excellent book, which you write about in your blog, For Black Girls Like Me. And this book delves into the typical adoption issues that might interest any adoptee reader, but it also takes a deep dive into what a transracial adoptee faces, loss of racial mirrors, and cultural and racial identity. All of these books that you mentioned can help expand awareness and empathy in the adults who read them along with their children. You've unpacked a lot there.
Well, it was so eye-opening. As being a white mother in a family of only white people, hard to see and know what these kids go through. It's complicated, you know. And it's important. It's important for everybody to understand, not just their own families, but other families as well. So finally, for older teens, Susan, I recommend a book called Pieces of Me. Who Do I Want to Be? It was edited by L. Ballard. It's a much more comprehensive book. It is a series of essays that are written by adoptees, and they face the same identity issues of all teenagers with the added complications of adoption. It's well written in a way that addresses difficult topics without sugarcoating, which is important, but it also doesn't catastrophize either, which I think is also important.
Yeah. So that's an important point. That balance between non-sugarcoating and catastrophizing, right? We want some balance there when we're talking about difficult topics.
Yeah, you don't want our kids to feel doomed by their circumstances. They may be challenged by their circumstances, but we can help them navigate and overcome them.
This is a side topic, but I'm going to ask it right now. So if you have your Adoption Attuned Family Library, would you have the adoption books separate, or would they be mixed in with the family, with the library books that are already there?
You know, my kids had bookshelves in their room. We had bookshelves in the family room. They were all over the place, but they knew where to find them. You know, I didn't keep them in my bedroom with it. I have to ask special permission to enter the bedroom and get it. So you want it accessible, basically. Whether if you have several kids, you might want to keep it in the family room. If you have only one, to parcel out to their bedrooms. But you want them to be able to access it without needing to ask you first, is my point.
Yes, gotcha. All right. You don't know this, listeners, but I'm on a Zoom video call with Gayle as we do this, and behind her are many bookshelves filled with books.
Indeed.
That prompted me to say, that crazy question. The point is, you want to have them accessible for your kids, right? And that says, hey, this is a part of our life. We happen to be adopted. We're adoptive family.
Absolutely.
Another great option, the Adoptee Survival Guide. Adoptees share their wisdom and tools. And this is written by adult adoptees, and they share their personal experiences and their insights and some strategies, which I really love. So, to have in your bookshelves books that are written by adult adoptees and talk about their experience, their reflection of their own life as an adoptee, that's important. That says it matters to you, right? If it's in your library.
Yeah, and I mean, they have the lived expertise. They've lived it. It's not just something they read about or wrote about it. They lived it.
I am mindful at this holiday season that many people give books as holiday presents. So why not choose books that help family and friends grow a deeper understanding of adoption so that they can be informed and effective members of your inner circle rather than complaining about them? Step into your educator role and offer them a lovely present of a book. So, Gayle, what books could you suggest that you believe belong in every family's library?
Susan, I have 3 books that I think are absolutely essential to a decent family library on adoption. And that is, first, written by Dr. Joyce McGuire Paval, who's also an adoptee and a psychiatrist that teaches at Harvard Medical School. So she's got major credentials, is The Family of Adoption. Great. It's short, but packed with important information. Another one is Adoption is a Family Affair, What Relatives and Friends Must Know. This one's written by Patricia Irwin Johnston. So again, it's how to bring your family and friends into an adoption attuned understanding of what your family, an adoption attuned understanding of what your family faces. And finally, The Open-Hearted Way to Open Adoption, which is subtitled Helping Your Child Grow Up Whole by Lori Holden. I mean, isn't that what we all want? Our kids to grow up whole. So that's, again, one of the best books you can have in your adoptive family library. Family of Adoption, Adoption is a Family Affair, The Open-Hearted Way to Open Adoption. If you don't already have those 3 books, run right out and get them now. You should have them.
And wrap them up and give them to your relatives.
But read them first.
For yourself. Yeah. So in this podcast, we talked about, let's say, books that fit the bill, that are adoption attuned. And here's what I have, and you can jump in, Gayle, and tell me if I've missed anything. We'd be looking for books that affirm reality of your child's life as an adoptee. We would look for books that have correct and age-appropriate information. We would choose books that reflect diversity, right? Diversity, families that look different. And there was one other point you made about diversity. We can go back to that. Also, books that are validating, that acknowledge and affirm an adoptee's experience. And look for books written by well-known, respected adoption authors. And another point would be, it's okay that a difficult conversation is reflected in a book, but at the same time, it shouldn't be catastrophized.
Yes.
We want to find books, look for books for our library that can reflect the constellation, the members in the adoption constellation. So birth mothers, adoptees, and adoptive parents.
Point I just thought of, Susan, is I think when our kids are, obviously we read to them. Obviously we think about having books about adoption, but as they grow, we might not necessarily think of that as often. They still need books that address that. So make sure you provide them for them. That's something we can do for our kids, is make sure they're available.
That's a great point. Providing books for our adult children is a way for us to connect. Gayle, we're coming to a close in our conversation today. And I want to say that it's truly a gift of love when a parent can understand their adopted child's experience and perspective, whether little or like our children are adults now. In the meantime, I invite you to check out our resource page on giftfamilyservices.com for book recommendations.
Yes, Susan, and those book recommendations are annotated. And also, Susan, I invite people to visit my other blog, which is called Writing to Connect, on gaylehswift.com. It reviews general books, so they're not adoption specific, but general books that are not intended to be about adoption. But I evaluate them through an adoption attuned lens, and this identifies ways of raising important adoption conversation threads in a natural, relaxed way. So I highly recommend that, although of course I'm prejudiced.
Well, I can attest to your talent as a writer and also your reflections and observations. Excellent. I hope we've convinced you to develop a robust library of adoption attuned books for both you and your family, your extended family, and some ideas on how to build your collection. Like living as an adopted family, it is a process. So Begin building your Adoption Attuned Family Library now.
Yeah, and you know what? Make sure they are adoption attuned. So, Susan, we want our listeners to remember that these are our observations as coaches and as adoptive parents. And we know that each person and family are unique and their experiences may be different from ours.
Yet our hope is that you'll consider adoption attunement practices as a guide for parenting your adoptive family.
Susan and I invite you to share your experiences with us. Go to the Growing Intentional Families Together Facebook page to leave your comments, and folks can visit our website and read our blogs. Lots of great content there, and you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter there as well.
Tell us what's going on in your family, and let's talk about it.
Sure. Contact us at Gift Family Services to explore this possibility.
That brings us to a close for today. I'm Susan from beautiful, and today it is not sunny, San Diego.
And I'm Gayle from foggy Florida. Both of us wish you a warm and joyful holiday season. And remember, please, adoption matters. Talk about it, read about it, learn about it. Thanks for listening. Till next time, so long.
Thank you for listening to Essentials for Adoption Attuned Parenting. If you liked the program, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help us spread the message about building strong and connected adoptive families. If you'd like more information about growing intentional families together and their adoption coaches, as well as to sign up for your free coaching consultation, visit giftfamilyservices.com. We have enjoyed being with you and invite you to join us again next time for another Essentials for Adoption Attuned Parenting.